writing a book is an incredibly strange experience. So, and because you spend years alone with imaginary people, hoping that someday they might matter to real ones.
Hello, aligned authors. I'm Valerie Ihsan, and this is episode 220 of the podcast. It is July 30th, 2026, as I record this. Today, we're talking with author Francesca Frost about romance novels being more serious than people think. It was a fascinating conversation, and I know that you will love it. First, I'd like to thank my existing patrons for believing in my work offline and here on the podcast. If you are a patron in either tier, you'll get my content always. You can support me and my dreams and my writing and my aligned author life for $11.11. And I will be so, so grateful. Truly, heart to heart, gratitude for your gifts. If you want coaching too, with 2 live calls each month, you can back me at $55.55 a month. You will never find coaching services for less money than this. So if you've ever wanted continued support for your writing, accountability for your projects, this is the way to do it. You can become a patron of the arts and of me at patreon.com/Valerie Ihsan, IHSAN. You can also support my friend and colleague and visiting co-host author Eric Mertz at patreon.com/Strange Air Stories for short stories in the paranormal mystery genre. Other updates. I talked to a woman today about doing breath work and sound healing and yoga at the retreat. So that was interesting and exciting. And we were talking about our visions and for the podcast, for the retreat. And also, how she would be a part of the retreat and what she would be teaching. And she was giving me some suggestions for venues. So still on the hunt for the venue. I want the perfect place for this retreat. If you want to be on the wait list, you can get more and more information as it comes for the Finding Your Voice retreat. You can go to valerieihsan.com/retreat and get on the wait list there. I have a free micro writing retreat for patron members, paid and unpaid ones. That's going to be on Thursday, August 27th at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. We're going to meet for 2 hours. It's going to be cozy. I'm going to light a candle, do an oracle card pull to set the intention for the evening. We'll do a check-in and a guided meditation. We'll be writing some words and we'll end with a little closing circle. So the link for that is in the Patreon feed. I finished a client project today, actually. I had the follow-up call today, so that was really cool. And last weekend, I went to a retreat here in Uvita, Costa Rica. And that's where I met the sound healer. And it was such an amazing experience. So I can't wait to bring her to the retreat so that you can experience it too. I am still working on the editing process for Structure and Spark, my nonfiction book for writers. And I am still reading Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons and The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. So that's my update. Let's get into the interview. Francesca Frost is a romance author who believes every great love story is a negotiation, an intimate reckoning shaped by the collision of past wounds, unspoken desires, and the fragile vulnerability two people must reveal in order to bring something lasting. Her fiction explores the ways love challenges, transforms, and ultimately redeems us, even when the path to connection is shadowed by complexity or risk. Her fascination with unconventional emotional landscapes led her to write stories set against modern high-stakes worlds. She uses romance not only as a vessel for desire and connection, but as an unexpected gateway into broader realms, most notably the fast moving, mysterious universe of cryptocurrency. By weaving human longing into the fabric of a technological frontier, Frost makes an often intimidating world vivid, accessible, and deeply engaging for her readers. Drawing inspiration from both contemporary and classic romance, Frost is committed to creating narratives where passion meets intellect, glamour meets grit, and love survives in the spaces where power, ambition, and vulnerability intersect. Her work invites readers to step into worlds that feel immersive, emotional, and daringly new, proving that love, in all its forms, remains the most transformative force we have. Welcome to the podcast, Francesca.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Great to be able to talk to you.
So, today we are talking about why romance novels are more serious than people think. And And I guess I just want to start there and hear what you have to say about that.
Well, once I got involved in the world of romance, it was just so exciting. It was new, but it was so exciting and had so much more depth to it than I actually ever thought, which is not unusual. Once you get to know a subject, you always see there's deeper layers. But what I've come to realize is contemporary romance is one of the most underestimated emotional technologies we have.
What do you mean by that?
So, well, if you think about fiction and how it's thought, or I feel it is like the rehearsal room for life. And psychology researchers have written about how the work of fiction is to simulate social experience. When a reader is going into a character's mind by reading the story and being part of their motive and part of their conflicts and emotional consequences, they're actually able to do that without having to live through it in real life. And for men, this is a really untapped contemporary romance is an untapped potential that's very enormous because men have a way in to see what women want beneath the plot. So the plot of romance, much of the time, because it's very structured and has a lot of tropes, is the main male character is tall and handsome and a billionaire and successful and dominant. But in the story, in the romance, the hero is becomes worthy and gets the girl when he learns to see her, when
Mm.
he notices her fears, when he respects what she wants. And he realizes that desire is not separate from safety, and that powerful sex comes from being bound to vulnerability and trust and recognition and all those emotional consequences from that. So that romance novels, in a way, overlap with relationship therapy.
Okay. But
So,
most of the readers of romance are women. That's a
well, my
statistic.
my point is to present the argument of how men would benefit
Mm-hmm.
from reading more romance
Okay.
if if they can understand what's going on. And I don't. One of my topics to sort of try and delve into is, are there men reading a lot of romance and they're just not admitting to it?
Mm.
What is that scenario? And is there a way to track that or study that?
Yeah.
I think it's something that would be very difficult to get statistics about, but
Yeah.
you know, romance is the biggest genre within books.
Right.
It outsells mysteries, thrillers, nonfiction. It's, billions of dollars a year. And I can't help but think some of that has to be
Men reading it.
written,
Yeah.
men reading it. So, in terms of, if a man were to read a um, advice manual, the
hmm
manual would tell him, well, listen better. But in a romance novel, a man, um, you know, he learns to hear what the woman feels like when she isn't listened to. So it's more showing instead of telling. Another example would be if the relationship manual is telling him to, um, repair the relationship, don't strive for a perfect relationship. A romance novel would make him feel the woman's wound and the powerful healing of a true apology. So again, it allows the person, and hopefully then if it's a man, to see how to achieve what they want in a relationship when they're dealing with a woman. And even with, advice manuals for sexual technique, and it could tell them how to do it better. But a romance novel will show a man that despite his whatever the technique is, without the connection, it's meaningless.
hmm
So it puts it into a context for them to see the benefits of really understanding what's going on in the woman's world. Now, for women, I think it's more obvious how romance plays many different roles. But I think the most important role that I've read, in this journey, I've read or listened to over 500 romance novels. And I feel like it really the role of the romance novel for women is that it validates their desires, their
Mm-hmm.
their wish to be chosen, pursued, protected, challenged or respected. Um, Romance gives that to them and tells them it's not silly, it's human. And sort of goes on off of that. The spin-off is that love is not frivolous. It's the way human beings learn to be less selfish and less defensive. And even in romance, I don't know if you know the tropes of romance, and
Some
I
of
can
them,
talk
yeah.
about that a
hmm
little bit. Yeah. So the happily ever after, the HEA, is often mocked. But it's not naive. Within the romance novel, the HEA is a moral structure that is saying, despite grief and danger and mistrust and betrayal, two people can do the work to choose each other and have a fully active life together. So
Mm.
maybe the average person reading a romance novel doesn't see all of that, but I think they feel it, and it does integrate and become internalized by reading the romance
hmm
novels.
So there's
Um,
always hope.
yes, there's always hope. Um,
So you brought up the HEA, and one of my questions had was I have heard that that romance is one of the hardest genres to write actually because it is so I don't want to say formulaic, but like the
Structured.
structure of it is very strong and you have to have a certain ending or it's not a romance, considered a romance. So how do you I mean, do you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah,
how do you get
yes.
around that constriction yourself as you write your romances?
Well, so after I wrote this book, which was really looking back a 5 year process. So I had the idea for the book, and then it was all, rumbling around in there. But for the first 2 years, while I was thinking of all those things, I had to learn how to write fiction. So I had done a lot of some nonfiction writing, but I had to learn how to write fiction. And so I took a lot of webinars. I read like all those books about how
Mm-hmm.
to write, Save the Cat. I loved Wired for Story.
Mm-hmm.
But Bird by Bird, still every writer's top favorite. I agree with that. I love Bird by Bird. And then I went to a writing retreat. I signed up for master class, took these great courses with Margaret Atwood and Joyce Carol Oates, and actually Malcolm Gladwell was really inspiring, and Michael Lewis. So I did all that and really tried to immerse myself in learning how stories work. So, it's the character development, the arc of the hero's journey, it's the backstory, it's the emotional tension, it's the dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
all of it. So I was learning all that for the first 2 years, and then I had to learn about the conventions of the genre, which I,
Mm-hmm.
I quickly learned does have the structure and the rules. And I would say personally, the hardest part, well, but actually looking back, it's if you're a first-time novelist, and I read about your journey as a writer, as a memoir writer,
Mm-hmm.
moving, and so much of your life in those stories. Um, I, it came to me that as a first-time novelist, because there was structure and romance, it was the best thing for me to have tackled because
Oh.
constraints force creativity. If
Mm.
it's, I could, I'm very daunted by the idea of writing fantasy and world building.
Mm-hmm.
And romance was perfect for me as a first-time novelist. But when I came to the happily ever after, that HEA, personally, I'm not wired that way. And if left to my own instincts, I would have killed off one of the main characters and made it a tragedy, right? Made it a tragedy. So learning to write a hopeful ending was actually an emotional education for me
Mm.
to push past my natural pessimism and to see that these characters could survive each other and earn their happiness. Although if you read my book, you'll know there are a couple of times in the novel where it almost didn't happen.
Well, that
But
makes all
I
that
tried,
tension, that's great.
yeah, yeah. I had to push through and see that they were going to get their happy ending. But
So
so
that's
yeah,
so
I wanted
interesting. Your natural inclination is more thriller or like yeah.
tragedy
So
or
why did you choose romance then as the first time? Was it because of the structure? On purpose you chose it because of that?
no, no. I think once I decided, I call it the 50 Shades of Grey approach. So,
Okay.
I don't know if you read 50 Shades of Grey. A lot of people don't like to discuss it.
I have not read it, but I know that it started out as fan fiction, like vampire fan
Yes,
fiction
great. It
something
has
like
such
that.
a very quote unquote, storied history. That's a very interesting history. But so, plunging in to read that, even I read that at the time it came out because why not? Everyone's talking about it and it's so,
Right.
so titillating. And what's the deal here? And then, I read it and I stepped back and I'm like, am I crazy or whatever? This is just a love story and with BDSM thrown in.
Mm-hmm.
And it introduced the reader through a love story to the world of BDSM. So my idea was, I'm very fascinated by cryptocurrency. I've been involved in cryptocurrency, and we need more women in cryptocurrency, was to write a love story to, in the setting of cryptocurrency, to tell a great story. I had my heroine and my hero and their trauma and emotional wounds and what they had to, you know, their journey to get to the other side of these wounds and discover each other. But at the same time, I wanted to introduce more women to the world of cryptocurrency in a way that, a friend of mine at, had said to me, you should write a book for women about cryptocurrency, and it should be called Cryptocurrency for the Modern Woman. And I'm
Okay.
like, that would be so painful to try and make nonfiction interesting and absorbing enough to keep, but a romance. And so, this book is not going to teach you how to trade Bitcoin.
Right.
It's not going to do that.
I hope not.
But it,
I think that would probably be in the context of a romance novel, probably not compelling. The pacing would be
no.
off a little bit, I think.
As I veer off into an explanation of NFTs, right? But actually, one of my editors kept on pushing me because I had brought up the concept in the story. My main character, Charlotte, goes on board at a cryptocurrency firm and wants to, bring luxury designers into cryptocurrency to have branding and issue NFTs for fashion. And I kept on saying, no, I'm going to lose the reader. I cannot do that. But then I found one little part where, I caved under the pressure of explaining that in a couple of paragraphs. Um, for what it's worth, it doesn't do justice to that area, but maybe it makes someone feel more comfortable when they hear about NFTs. Um, but uh, you know, one of the things that came up through this whole process is, and things that I learned about myself as a writer. I don't know, you must have learned so much about yourself writing your memoirs, right? Writing your books.
Yeah, yeah, I think
Did,
it's more when you write memoir, it's a lot of time has passed, and so it's more
okay.
like an observer, like this is what happened. I saw what happened. I lived what happened. I know what it felt like to live it. And now, 8 years later or 15 years later or whatever it is that I'm writing it, my worldviews now have to
Oh,
sort of,
yes. Oh, yes.
not
How do you
affect
align
it,
that?
but what's that?
How do you align that
How
with
do I
what
line that?
maybe
Yeah.
with what you were feeling at the time?
Well,
That's
sometimes
a
you
very
can't align
challenging.
it and on purpose. You don't want to, because you want to stay in the story and write what was
Yes.
true at that time. And at that time,
Okay.
the best the decisions that you make are from, you're always trying to be your best. So at that time, that was the best I could be. So trying to be honest about that's what's hard about memoir for me. The embarrassment of showing up that way on the page, you know what I
Oh, I
mean,
can
where I
imagine.
feel like, okay, I'm totally more evolved now. I don't want people thinking this is actually what I think now. But
Yes.
still, staying true to the character of the
Yeah.
time and telling the truth of the story, from that era of my life, I guess.
But I'm sure that brings to the reader a sense of authenticity,
I hope
right?
so. Yeah.
The
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability there that
Yeah.
makes it a way to relate. If that
Yeah.
isn't there, if the vulnerability and our sense of authenticity isn't there, it's hard to relate to that. For me, what I find and what I won't allow to happen going forward is, dealing with editors that I ended up changing parts of my story that now at the end I feel like they were valid parts of the story, but I feel like editors have their own bias. And, I worked with two developmental editors and then a regular editor on this book. And in the process, like, one of the things I wanted to explore was something that I feel is going to become more mainstream. And I don't know if you've seen it. I probably see it because I'm more in the romance world, but it is going to be more mainstream, is that there's gender fluidity.
Mm-hmm.
We're moving towards more gender fluidity, and that involves polyamory.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to delve into that a little bit in my story where Dwayne's co-founder, Oliver, Dwayne and Oliver are best friends. They're brothers, essentially, for all intents and purposes, and how Oliver falls in love with Charlotte also.
Okay.
And so there's a tension there between the three of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just little things I was adding into dialogues. And then it sort of comes to a head with one chapter or scene between Charlotte and Oliver. And the editors just went crazy. Like, you've got to take it out. Your readers are not gonna like, they're not gonna like it because Oliver, they're gonna sense that Oliver is the boy next door. He's the good guy. And now they're not gonna like him, or they're not gonna like Charlotte for even addressing this issue. And that was really, I wish I had more of a sense of myself as a writer, because looking forward to my next novel, one of the potentials is to feature Oliver. And in the back of my mind, I was going to have that novel open with his challenge, his emotional wound being trying to get over Charlotte,
Uh-huh.
and how he can come to terms with that and go on to find someone else to love, and how he deals with that conflict that's generated with his friendship with Dwayne, and keep their three relationships going and working. And that was going to be part of the next novel, to
So
explore all of.
did you take out that scene then because of talking with an editor?
Yes,
Okay. So
yes, I
now
took
your
that scene
premise
out.
for book two is kind of not there anymore.
It's not there unless I start the whole book and reveal that
Uh-huh.
during this whole time, Oliver had feelings for Charlotte that the readers didn't know about in the first book. Because you know why? I like, they say good artists borrow, great artists steal. I stole that idea right from Romeo and Juliet, because what happens in Romeo and Juliet? In the beginning of Romeo and Juliet, Romeo is pining away after another woman.
Mm.
And he goes on to this party and meets Juliet
Mm-hmm.
and falls headfirst for her. But his love interest was another woman at the start of that play. So I felt like, yeah, that's a kind of little twist.
You can do that, yeah.
Anyway,
So I
yeah,
wanted to get back to you said in the last little bit you've said that you wished that you were stronger when you were talking to editors. You wish that you were a stronger writer so you could like, I don't know, fight for your cause, your corner or whatever,
vision.
your vision. But also, I mean, you also said that when editors would come to you and say something about add this in or put this in, you said no, like that would not make a good story. So your views of story and the emotional arc of characters is really strong. So where was that disconnect of I know story, this works, I'm not going to listen to you, and oh, you think I should take this out? Okay, like where was the disconnect there?
I think it was because I felt like I was fighting a lot of battles with the editors.
Okay. You were like, gotta take one for the
So
team, kind of like
I
pick your
so that
battles.
was, yeah, because I didn't yield on other ones. So there was a big brouhaha because in my novel, Charlotte is a sophisticated woman living in New York, and Just from my own personal knowledge and experience, any woman over the age of 30 or certainly 35 living in a major city is now freezing their eggs if they're not married or engaged or whatever. The technology is there
Yeah.
and it's paid for by companies, right? It's part of the healthcare benefits now. And it's
Wow,
no,
I did not know that. So it's
yes.
way
And
more
so
mainstream than it used to be.
it's so mainstream that to me, like I would, if you asked women in New York, I would say 85% of them have frozen their eggs. And they're doing it at a younger and younger age, right? Because it's
Well, I
like,
guess the
oh, if,
eggs are healthier then.
yep. And it's an option. It's not the answer. It's
Hmm.
just they are trying to have an option like Charlotte wanted in case her plans didn't move forward the way she wanted. I had another two editors like challenge that. Oh, I had to describe this more. I had to explore this more. This, what am I talking about with this? It was like I was talking about her doing something really, I don't know, sensational. And I said, no, I don't want to use up my
Hmm.
story time and my storyline to go off and explore that subject. That doesn't interest me,
Yeah,
and not enough to say I want to share, I want to take the reader on that journey with me about getting your freezing your eggs.
right.
So
It
that
didn't
was a
carry
big
the story
one.
forward.
No, no, it was a part of it, and it was to show how determined she was amid everything she was juggling to keep moving forward and to reinvent herself and do what's needed to have the life she felt she wanted to have. Although, the whole one of the not flaws, but her thinking. So that's what happened for her. A big part of it was she had a certain way of thinking about what her personal life should be. And that was, I think, a bear holding her back. And with Dwayne, she realizes it doesn't have to be the way she thought. I'm going to find an older man who wants to get married and settle down and have a family. And she realizes, no, she can trust Dwayne, this younger man, this sort of someone she perceived as a playboy and not serious about settling down and having a family. So that was one. And then it was just daily, I have a whole draft file of responses to my editors that start with, who cares? It doesn't matter. What are you talking about? And I did not send those. I cultivated a working relationship. I mean, like so for the sports car in the novel, I was like, what would a tech guy? What kind of sports car would a tech guy drive? So I researched them all, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, blah, blah, blah. I didn't know half of them. And so then I chose a McLaren, which in reality, a lot of tech people like because the software is so sophisticated and they're very much into the software and downloading and what it can do. And so then I went on to a Reddit thread of actual McLaren owners,
Hmm.
sports car owners. And the big thing there was they all seemed to have these midnight black colored McLarens. So that's the color I used in my, so McLarens are known, their signature color is papaya orange.
Okay.
But in reality, people who own McLarens were choosing the black.
Hmm.
So one of the editors, no kidding, sent me a PDF in the margin comments, a McLaren PDF of all their different colors. And she said, don't you want to explore having a different color for this car in your novel? And I'm like, no, who cares? I did my research. This is the color it's going to be. I'm like,
So pick your battles. That was
yeah,
when you stood on the hill and said, "Nope, I'm planting my flag here. Midnight black it is. I know what I'm talking about." So that's
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
So this is
I
your
don't,
first. I want to go back over the timeline for just a second. So you when you first decided to write fiction, you'd been thinking about novel ideas for a while, had been percolating, and then you spent 2 years studying craft and story structure and that sort of thing, and taking classes, and then you spent some time just studying romance and reading those 500 novels, romance novels. So when did you first write your rough draft? Like how, I guess what I want to know is how long did it take you to get that first book out from the time you were like, I want to write a book. Oh, I want to write a romance book. Oh, here's my romance novel. You know, what's the
So I would
trajectory?
say, it wasn't, it's sort of a continuum.
Right.
While I was studying the craft, I was having my ideas and I had journals. I filled up like 4 journals. And then I would, when I finally decided to, I had the major part of the book, I put that into Scrivener. But I had to
Mm-hmm.
learn about Scrivener, right? That's a
Right.
whole
That's a whole other thing. Yeah. Did
that's
you
a
take the
whole other
class
thing.
or?
I know, another webinar, more
Yeah.
webinars. But anyway, so
Took a
when
lot of webinars for Scrivener.
So then, but it seemed like that's what authors were doing. What do I
Hmm.
know? Some people just use Microsoft Word documents, that seemed to be valid, but whatever. So, during that time, that was about 2 years. So that was about 2 years going back, looking at my journals when everything was coming together and when I could start putting it into Scrivener. And then once I felt like it was complete and ready for an editor, um, and then finding a self-publisher, that was another 8 months.
Hmm.
So that is like been another year. So I
Okay.
say, in a way, it was a 5-year process.
Okay.
And but hopefully, the next one will come faster,
Hmm.
or, that groundwork has been laid. Although I feel like I'm still always learning. My big thing now, I am telling you, I don't know, do you read romance at all?
I have, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So I am so impressed by the power of some of these plots. Yes, there's lots of tropes. I like dark mafia romance. That's like such a well-worn, used tropes in those. But outside of that, within the whole realm of romance, I am just blown away by some of the talent that is out there. And actually, I've started collecting the opening scenes and opening chapters of
Oh,
some of these romances, because, for example, there's a big romance writer called J.T. Geisinger. Her opening chapter of this one book, Fall Into You, the dialogue there, I study it more than the short Hemingway's short stories. I have been all over that chapter because it's so brilliantly written. It's like the dialogue, the bantering, and the tension of attraction, from some of the old Hollywood rom-coms.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah. That fast,
so
witty. Mm-hmm.
yes, repartee,
Mm-hmm.
but that brings the characters closer, through that kind of dialogue. It's yeah. So I am definitely, right as of now, sticking with the romance and really loving it, really
That's
loving
awesome.
it.
So you collect first chapters and what else? There was another thing I thought you said.
Of the plots. So
Plots.
there's
Okay, first
another,
chapters and plots of romance novels to use
yeah,
as a
yeah.
study guide. Okay.
Yes, yeah, because I feel they're so well done, and just the premise, it's um equal to, there's a lot of suspense in romance a lot of times, and that is a
Mm-hmm.
category, romantic suspense.
Mm-hmm.
um and I think the prominent writers in this field now know that, and they've introduced a lot of that into the genre. um But I have to tell you, so in my effort to get more men to read romance, I personally bring it up with, men I know, husbands of couples and stuff. And I ask them, do they read romance? No, they all like nonfiction. But then some of them read fiction too, obviously. And I asked one person to tell me his favorite book, which was, what's his name? Nelson DeMille, the Gold Coast. So I said, okay, I haven't heard of him. I haven't read that book. Tell me why you like it. What's the plot about? And he goes, oh, it's set in the same area as The Great Gatsby on Long Island with these wealthy estates. And this couple's living in this one wealthy estate. And then next door, to the other wealthy estate, a new couple moves in. And it turns out he works for the mafia. And then the woman of the wife of the man telling the story has an affair with the mafia guy next door. I'm like, that's a romance. I mean, it's there, but I just don't think it's generally acknowledged. And he said, oh, he thought it was so clever because the guy is always forced to sleep on the couch after he has his fights with his wife or whatever and gets into trouble with her. And I'm like, those are elements of a classic romance story. But for some reason, it doesn't register or they find it more acceptable when it isn't
Hmm.
in that genre per se.
Yeah. So one thing I've seen you say before is that you like to talk about how fiction is a way we can use it to rewrite our lives, kind of. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, so I talked about, one of the simple reasons of wanting to write a novel was because I read so much and I
Mm-hmm.
was consuming content. And I said, enough of this. I want to create content
Mm-hmm.
and I want to write a story about the ideas in the worlds that fascinate me. So that's the cryptocurrency. I'm
Right.
interested in AI, blockchain, all of that. So that was like the simple reason. And then the other reason was to learn how to write fiction. But I would say the most personal reason for writing this book and why I sort of shifted gears from this to this story from another story I had intended to originally write was because of the line of thought in one of the books I like called Atonement by Ian McEwan.
Mm-hmm.
People are very familiar with the movie
Mm-hmm.
by Christopher Nolan. Very, very powerful movie. The book is very powerful and a tragedy. But in that book, the line of thought is that um, fiction is a way to rewrite what real life did not allow us to have. If you know the plot of that, the young girl who accuses the gardener of raping this other woman and he goes to jail and he is not able to be with the great love of his life and they end up dying young, each of them. So the young girl then grows up to be a novelist and
Mm-hmm.
rewrites their story where they were together.
Mm.
And that's her atonement. That's her atonement. And the idea is to give people the ending they never received, right? It's a
Mm.
way, it's very powerful that way. You can give
Yeah.
people what real life did not allow them to have. And so, I've been involved in cryptocurrency for a long time, and I really believe in its potential to do good, especially for people who live in unstable or countries with unstable currencies or unsafe banking systems. I really feel it can level the financial playing field for people in a meaningful way. And so when FTX, the cryptocurrency trading platform, collapsed, to me, it was very personal, not financially, but morally,
Mm,
because the scale of the fraud and the betrayal of trust, the waste of opportunity
mm,
and intelligence was like devastating. And out of that disappointment came this idea to rewrite that story. And
okay.
what if I could create a cryptocurrency platform that was led by founders who were not only brilliant but moral,
Mm-hmm.
who, believed that trust was not to be exploited, but to be protected. And to sort of ask the question, you know, what if Sam Bankman-Fried had been a moral person? What kind of cryptocurrency company would that look like? Because, you know, Sam Bankman, I don't know if you know the FTX story.
No, I don't.
Actually, so it's very, very interesting because I started writing this book, or had ideas about this book going back to 2021, and then FTX collapsed in 2022. But during that time, I knew of Sam Bankman-Fried, and one of the reasons was because of his belief in effective altruism, which is a philosophy started at Princeton University by a professor there, Peter Singer. And so Sam Bankman-Fried had no real background in cryptocurrency. He worked for Jane Street on Wall Street. Yeah, Jane Street it's called, which was a big hedge fund that did flash trading and all that stuff. And when he signed on to, you know, believe in effective altruism, he was looking around for the best way to make a lot of money. So, in that philosophy, you sort of live your life to earn money to give it away.
Mm-hmm.
So he started Alameda, a research cryptocurrency firm, but then branched off and founded FTX.
Okay.
And so I really followed him. I believed in what he was doing, and it was very painful to see what
I,
really happened.
mm,
But I personally feel, and I don't, this is my personal feeling. I don't know the actual evidence for all this. I feel he was unnecessarily made an example of because in the cryptocurrency world, there are so many worse people than Sam Bankman-Fried. First of all, the $7 billion of that fraud has all been recovered, and investors have gotten their money back. But what happened was the big investors in FTX were the flash trader hedge funds on Wall Street. And they wanted him extradited back to the US and basically for him to be punished. Who's going to, I didn't even invest in FTX. It was registered in Nassau. It was outside the US. Take your risks, right? And yet, for some reason, there was this morality that what he had done was so bad and he had to come back to the US and serve time. Um, that's just all my personal opinion. But over the course of this time, so my point was saying I started my novel in 2021 thinking about it. FTX happened in 2022. Netflix is releasing a series about FTX.
okay.
Sometime this year. I
Uh-huh.
just learned about it several months ago. And their whole premise, guess what they're doing? How are they presenting the FTX
What if?
bankruptcy? They're making it a love story,
Uh-huh. See?
which
You beat him to
I
you
feel
beat Netflix to the punch. So that's everyone needs to go read The Crypto King's Muse
to see the real story of
to
what could
see.
have been. They are right. The screenplay, from what I understand, is about the love story between the woman he was sleeping with at the time who ran Alameda, but he wouldn't even acknowledge her as his girlfriend. But
Okay.
now they have created, why have they taken that story and turned it into this great love story? Because it's a,
They
romance is,
rewrote the story that she should have had.
yes.
That's awesome. I can what a cool like writing exercise, like minding your own life or the lives of people that you care about and finding places where they were mistreated or they just, had a shitty run of it or whatever and come up with story ideas that, reverse that and give them the story that they should have had, the ending they should have had.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So you've only written the one book?
I've only written the one book. What reading all those romance novels though has really helped me because what I saw early on is in a lot of the novels that I read, they're done as a series. And I
Mm-hmm.
think you've had people on your podcast talk about the value of series
Yeah.
and what Amazon looks for in terms of
Mm-hmm.
making your book visible. I don't have a series, but what I learned to do, and it was fun once I realized this, is I introduced three different characters into the Crypto Kings Muse that I could then go on and do spin-off stories about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So one is Lily, who is Oliver's sister, and that would be the world of AI. She's
Okay.
studying to get her PhD at the University of Toronto in AI. One is Oliver himself, and towards the end of this first book, I have him referencing the fact that he's now building a metaverse on the Riverbank cryptocurrency platform.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to introduce the whole idea of what the metaverse is. I don't want people living in the metaverse. I don't want the story of how they're living in I want to talk about who's building it and what's going
Okay.
on.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one was actually the original book I wanted to write was the story of Grace, who in the Crypto Kings Muse is a friend of Charlotte's, who is the assistant to a well-known French movie director who has really been the part of the genius behind him, but she's never gotten her acknowledgement.
All
She's been
right.
in the shadow and he won't give her the credit that is her due.
One of the
Um,
things I really love about writing is giving people voice when they don't have it. And and I think that is a an altruistic thing to do, as well. Being able to, I'm also thinking like dog rescue, they don't have all of the things that I care
oh,
about and put money into are ways to help those without voice have a voice. So as a writer,
yeah,
we can do those same things and
yeah, it's
give the
just the
people that
power.
didn't have the story or the chance to tell their story, I guess. So when I come up with novel ideas, often it is a character coming forward that has a story that wants it told.
Yes, yeah.
So
And
what,
that I think Well,
yeah?
so I was going to say for Grace, that story came out of my interest in the idea of women directors in Hollywood,
Mm-hmm.
and how tough an interest industry that's been, and there's been breakthroughs, but so few, and there's not a lot of role models of successful women directors. So I wanted to sort of explore that in that book.
So you said that love stories are doing some of the most interesting intellectual and emotional work in contemporary literature. So are you talking, is that what you're saying right now, basically? That
Well, I
these
think
current themes or these what ifs or like there's all these really smart women in history that never got acknowledged, for instance. So
Yes.
is that what you're
Yeah.
talking about? The intellectual and emotional work?
Yeah, it's not so much that. I think it's the way the writers in the field now are staying within the constraints and structure of romance, and yet still able to come up with these very entertaining, very brilliant type plots within a very constrained. They're not Well, there is a lot of romantasy, which is
Hmm.
romance and fantasy. I don't know
Hmm.
that world. I don't really read that part of the genre. But so
Just love
maybe,
stories in a different world.
yes, although fantasy is so unbound.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't like knowing that at the last minute this person can have a superpower that I had no idea about because the writer just decided to, and it changes the whole playing field, right?
Hmm.
So I like my constraints or knowing what to expect. But so writing romantic fantasy, I think actually is a natural evolution, and that's very hot now. It's like the one within the genre. It's romantasy is really, really popular. And I think it's a natural evolution that writers would feel too constricted by playing, regular romance and would want to go out into the fantasy world where they wouldn't be so constrained and could
Hmm.
develop these other worlds that you can't always do when you're following the tropes.
So
So,
following the constraints you said before is kind of what unleashes creativity. And so also you're now seeing that it helps with that. Well, I guess what you're saying is how in the world do they come up with all these cool ideas and still stick to the tropes? That's
yes,
amazing.
that is it. And I don't think people really acknowledge, well, I think romance is dismissed in general as a lesser type of reading. And I do make the distinction of contemporary romance, which is what I wrote, and literary fiction. There's literary fiction and then contemporary romance. And I'm not trying to do literary fiction. I feel that's very hard. I don't have an MFA in writing or whatever. But interestingly enough, there was a big article in the Atlantic that was called "When Did Literature Get Less Dirty?" And that article was addressing the idea that in literary fiction, sort of what, if you want to call it highbrow fiction, that is a romance at its heart, that it's a beautiful development of the relationship and the feelings between two people, but there's no sex. You know, it's very vanilla. And the writer was questioning, why has that happened as compared to novels like Portney's Complaint, literary fiction written back in the 60s or 70s. Now it's almost not mentioned at all or very
Hmm.
little or glossed over, which I, as a romance novel, feel you know, any part of a romantic relationship starts with some form of the physical. The
Yeah.
chemistry has to be there.
Yeah.
And psychology has shown that there's a lot of couples who no longer are intimate and stay together for 40 or 50 years, but a big part of what keeps a relationship together is, mutual sexual satisfaction. And to not explore that when you're writing a romantic story is sort of skirting the issue or feeling like, oh, it's not literary if I include a lot sex between the main
Hmm.
characters.
Okay. Hmm. That is interesting.
Yeah, and I see that myself. Like one of the books I like is Intermezzo by I'm blocking on her name. She did Normal People. She's an Irish writer.
Sally
She
Rooney?
actually, yes, Sally Rooney. So that love story, it's more than just a love story, but it's central to the love story. She does explore a little bit of polyamory. The main character is in love with two different women. But again, the fact to be in love with two different women and to have very little intimacy as part of the storyline, it doesn't resonate as being authentic.
Mm, less realistic. That's interesting. Makes sense
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
Kind of like in action films where nobody goes to the bathroom. Like, I don't know about
Right?
that. When did they eat breakfast? Come on, you guys. But yeah,
I think that's a more
I
interesting.
guess you have to like cut some of those scenes out for time, right? So we'll just gloss over the sex part because it takes up too much time. Let's just get to the maybe that's what they're thinking. I don't know.
Yeah,
Because it
yeah,
depends on what they're exploring,
yeah.
story-wise and theme-wise.
Yeah, so at a time when there is so one of the biggest hitters in the romance field, I don't know if you know her, is Colleen Hoover.
Hmm.
I've read a couple of her romance. I said, "Oh, I've got to read what she's writing." She has sold 35 million books. At one point, I think she had five or seven of her books on the bestseller list at the same time.
Yeah.
So, and her novel, her books have a lot of sex in them. So on the one side, you have like contemporary romance, which is, I had to decide what level of sex I was going to include in my
Hmm.
novel. And
And
on the
that
other hand,
really helps with your marketing too. Like there's people that want spicy only, or there's people that
only,
want clean only, or whatever. So you that has to be in your marketing copy.
yes. And your previous guest, Kay Wagner, who I've listened to that podcast a couple of times, would say when you're writing the book, you should be factoring in the marketing to
Yeah.
know how much spice you're going to put in the book in
Right.
order
Yeah.
to make it popular and have it get bought. But there's an extreme though, because as I see like I can't believe some of the sex that appears in some of the romance novels, and that's just my bias and maybe my age or whatever. But at the same time, on the other side, you have the literary fiction that's getting so restrained. So it's a very interesting time and trying to figure out where to set what settles out in the middle, I guess. I'm trying to do sort of what settles out in the middle.
Yeah.
But
So, in your 500 books, romance novels that you read, how many of the Colleen Hoovers did you read?
I read two of them. And
Okay.
what
And
I will tell
she did 35 million, is that what you said? Copies?
She sold
Right. That's what I meant. Sold.
35 million. She's written like, I don't know how many, 20,
God.
30,
I was
40,
going to
a
say at least
lot.
20. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And her, It Ends With Us. I did read that book. That was made into a big Netflix. And I think she has two or three others already being made into Netflix movies. Um, so what I would say is that reading her, um, I'm not in a position to critique it as a first-time novelist, but what I say is what is very powerful and maybe why she is so successful isn't even the spiciness of her books, it's her story. She tells a very compelling, in fact, her opening to the book Verity is on my list of one of the great openers.
That's
Um,
awesome. Okay. That's been on
yeah.
kind of like a to be read pile for me for a while. So I keep not buying it. I'll pick it up and I'll read the back of it and think, I don't know, maybe, and put it back. But I keep picking it up. So I guess maybe I'll have to read it
I
after
think that's
reading
been
yours, of course.
yes, yeah. So let me ask you, how do you handle people, or how do you feel about whether people have read your book that you know? Um, do you? do you try and get into discussions about your books with people
No,
you know, or do
I
you?
don't. I don't because, well, the novel was in a book club of people that I knew peripherally from a Spanish class I was in. And so I went
Yes.
to their book club where they talked about the book. And I wasn't able to go to the whole thing. It was like a dinner. So I kind of slipped in at the last bit. And so they got to say some things that, like, they liked and they didn't like, about the book. So that was really interesting to hear. And as a writer, like, the longer you're a writer and the longer you go through feedback and writers groups and you get critiques, like, you have to have any artist has to have a fairly thick skin when it comes to critiques so that you don't, like, give up on doing it. So that didn't bother me. But in terms of the memoirs, and personal friends, well, actually, it doesn't matter if it's memoir or novels. I appreciate it if people do read the book, but I never ask them what they think because I don't ever want to, like, put them in a position to, like, say what like, I feel I don't want to put them on the spot. And also, while as writers we are writing for readers to read, when it comes to feedback on the actual structure or the writing style, I don't go to readers for that. I go to writers because they know what it takes. So I guess what I'm saying is, so one of the things that I do with all of my editing clients is I go through for the story analysis clients, I go through a rubric, and it has all of the elements of story, and I can kind of rate each element of story on that against
Oh,
that rubric. So that is a super helpful, like, editing tool that writers would know how to use. And so the feedback
yeah.
I would get from editors or critique groups, other writers, would be helpful. Whereas,
In that sense.
yeah, and like, if a reader says, "Well, I just didn't feel connected to the main character." As a writer, I could take that information and feel, like, crestfallen, or like, oh, they don't get me, or they didn't, get I wasn't able, I failed, or whatever. But as a writer, I know if I hear that from another writer, that means there's not enough character motivation, there's not enough inner dialogue. So now I know how to fix that. And it becomes less of a critique against me as a
Yes,
writer. And
yes,
it's just like, oh, okay, I'll go in and tweak that, you know?
yes,
So that's why I don't like to talk to, I mean, of course I want to talk to other readers about if they want to come and tell me what moved them in my book. I do read reviews. I know some people don't. So, I guess I like to hear from my people. Of course. I mean, that's part of why we write the books. But in terms of actual, like, feedback to change a scene or something like that, I don't usually use a lot of beta readers for that purpose. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, what I found is, in many ways, I never bring up the book. I leave it up to people I know to bring it up because you know what? Maybe it's me or my hesitancy as a writer, or I don't want to put pressure on them to
Mm-hmm.
feel, it's a lot of them bought the book. I don't think a lot of them have read the book, but that's
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. That's
okay
totally okay because they want to
because
support you.
yeah, and I would hate to read a book I wasn't interested in.
Yeah.
Can you imagine anything more torturous than to read something that doesn't interest you?
Yeah.
So I
And
get it.
yeah,
But
one of
as a
the,
result,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, as a result, I don't really feel like I know what people close to me think about the book,
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay too, because I'm not doing it for them.
Right. I think a good way to begin a conversation like that is to ask them what they like to read. Because one of the very best things I did for myself as a writer is finally internalize and know that my husband is not my ideal reader. He's not my market. He does not read the kind of books that I write. No interest. So I mean, he reads the memoirs because like he's in them and and he cares about me. He's interested in me, so he wants to know, more about my internal world. But the other stuff,
Yes,
like he's not I don't care if he
it's
does
not
read my novel. Like it doesn't. So same
right.
with my friends too. They buy everything I write. They come to my book launch parties, but I don't expect them actually to read
I
it.
know, I know. And I feel like that, and then so to me, I feel good that I can accept that. I don't take
Yeah,
it as a personal disappointment, and
right.
it surprised me. But once I finished that book, and it's out in the world, it's like it's out there, and I get why if some books are then made into movies or whatever, some authors seem like they want it to follow the book and get very upset and try and control it. But other authors sort of say, no, let them interpret the book, the
Yeah.
way they want.
Hmm.
And I feel I'm in the latter category.
Yeah, I think that's
So,
healthier. Like once you let it go out into the world, it's really no longer yours.
right. And it's the same way with music. So one thing
It
we haven't
is. I
talked
was
about
just
is
thinking about that. Yeah.
the fun I had. So whenever I really felt bogged down, and you have those periods where you're like, this just isn't happening, and why am I doing this?
Yes.
I would always say, okay, I'll work on my playlist. So so I also learned that from reading other romance novels that were putting a Spotify playlist in front of
Oh.
their books. And then I would find the playlist on
Uh-huh.
Spotify. And that was a whole other experience because I had known a little bit, I had known about electronic dance music, but when I started this book, I fell into that world and if I asked people beforehand, what type of music do you think fits cryptocurrency, the world of cryptocurrency? A lot of people would say jazz or pop, but really, if you know that whole area, it's a platform, it's coding, it's software. What do those people in that world like? They like the trance music of
Hmm.
EDM, of
Yeah.
electronic music. So I'm such a big fan of EDM, and I put a lot of them in my playlist. So that was a lot has been a lot of fun also.
That's cool. Where do you get the playlist? Where do readers get the playlist? Is
Oh, they
it
can get it on Spotify under the title The Crypto King Muse
okay?
playlist.
Oh, okay. Awesome. I'm gonna link it in the show notes.
Oh, great.
Okay,
Great.
cool. Playlist. Crypto Kings Muse playlist. Awesome. All right, well, we are just about out of time, Francesca. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you want to talk about, or is there anything that you want to plug or share with us, or tell us something you're excited about right now?
Well, I just, um, one thing I found myself sharing with uh, people who were sort of in the trenches with me, and I'm sure you had this, was that uh, writing a book is an incredibly strange experience. So, and because you spend years alone with imaginary people hoping that someday they might matter to real ones.
Mm,
And it's sort of like an Alice in Wonderland experience that way. So just that was something I've shared with people on this journey about what it's like.
that's a great way to put it. I love that. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the Aligned Author podcast. It was such a pleasure to talk with you. There were so many fun ideas in there, and I hope I took enough notes for the show notes. And in the show notes will be a link to your website, to your book, and also to the Crypto Kings Muse playlist on Spotify.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Valerie.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.